All right, we got Jackson Saffon and Marshall Charrington here for the Seattle Sports Soup. This is our second podcast, and today we're going to give you all an update on the Hawks, the season recap, talk about the draft for next year, talk about the Sonics deal with the Maloofs, talk Husky basketball and football, and we'll give you a Mariners update as well. So first we're going to start off with the Hawks. Marsh, what do you think about the season and how everything went and looking into next year?
Well, I think the season went very well. Obviously, it was way better than anyone expected. Russell Wilson just balling out there with Marshawn. The defense was awesome. I think they just need to get some help in the run defense and as well as the pass rush, of course. But I've just kind of been debating whether to use our first draft pick on a pass rusher or on the defense, or kind of like that big playmaker on an offense, like a wide receiver.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of different talk about whether we should draft a receiver, a defensive lineman. One of the names that's going around for a receiver is Marcus Wheaton. He's one of the top receiver prospects, and he's really good, but I think that for that first-round pick, it was clearly shown in the Falcons game that we need a better defensive line. Clemens was obviously out, but the run defense and was getting gashed up, and we couldn't get any pass rush. So I really think that the defensive line, specifically defensive tackle, needs to be addressed with our first pick.
I think you can also kind of, maybe if you want to, like trade out of the first round, get some more draft picks. I know that the Seahawks management loves as many draft picks as they can get, and they have 10 right now. But I think if they trade out of the first, they don't really need that 25 spot, and they can secure teams, say like a team who's not in the first round, but the second round, get 2 picks in the second round, still 2 quality players. So that could be an option too. Also, big name wide receivers, Cordarrelle Patterson from Tennessee. Of course, Robert Woods, but I've been hearing as much with him. For defensive end, Answa, a defensive end from BYU, has been showing up a lot. And also on Draft Talk, Desmond Trufant has been impressing some scouts with the Senior Bowl this week, so he could jump in the first round.
Yeah, I've heard Trufant could jump in the first, maybe the second as well. He could be a good nickel cornerback. We obviously have Browner and Sherman on the outside. And talking about corners, there's been news around the Jets. Yeah, talking about Darrelle Revis, how he might get traded, and the Hawks have apparently shown some interest in acquiring Revis, but I really think that that'd be a big mistake. Sherman and Browner are due under $1 million combined for next year, while Revis is due $6 million, and Revis is also coming off big knee surgery. So I think that you keep the guys we have, and you definitely should look to lock them up early, and so we don't have to get any contract disputes later. But with those guys, and if we could draft another good nickel cornerback like Trufant or somebody else and get that good, strong third cornerback, I really don't think we need to look to acquire Darrelle Revis.
Yeah, I don't think that Trufant will be back next year, and if he is, I expect some heavy competition for that nickel cornerback spot. And with Revis, I think you're just giving up too much for something you pretty much already have, but that's kind of cool to think about a dream team with those cornerbacks.
Definitely. But other trade talk that's been going around is whether the Hawks should trade Matt Flynn and who they should trade Matt Flynn to, because obviously he's the backup now. He's due a lot of money, and so if we could trade him, that would definitely be a good way to free up cap space for the future.
Yeah, I've kind of just listened to a lot of the radio this week and all of that kind of talk. I've been hearing a lot they could release him or something like that. He could go to Jacksonville, old ties there. But do you think that he could be traded for Tebow in a draft pick?
I think that could be a legitimate thing, except Tebow, he's not really on a team. He is on the Jets now, but I'd expect them to release him. But if they could, the Jets, you could definitely see them making a play for Flynn, because obviously no one really believes in Sanchez. And Tebow, he kind of fits that same mold as Wilson. Obviously, he's not as good of a passer, but the Hawks management has been talking about getting a backup with a similar skill set to Wilson, just in case Wilson does go down. They could keep running that same offense. And so that is a possibility. Definitely looking to acquire Tebow in a draft pick. Another name I've heard for a potential backup is bringing back Tavares Jackson.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Not sure how that would go over, but just another name that's been floating around. And so yeah, Flynn, I definitely think if we could trade him, that would be the best move. But it is going to be hard to find a trade partner because the other executives around the league know that the Hawks don't want to tie up that much money in a backup quarterback, and so there's word that the Hawks will release Flynn, and that way another team could just pick him up without having to trade for him.
I also think the Jets could be interesting trade partners this offseason since John Idzik has gone there. Now he's their new GM. Yep. I mean, you've already kind of seen that with the Darrelle Revis talk. I mean, Jaguars could be interesting too with Gus Bradley. Could look at some offensive pieces, but I just want to, I'm not sure when the timetable for free agents having to decide to declare to a team and when the draft is, because I know we signed Flynn before the draft last year with Russell, and I don't want that kind of thing to happen again where we sign kind of a free agent who is as good as or maybe even worse than someone we get in the draft who we could obviously get for less money.
Yeah, and so clearly the Hawks had a very good season last year and better than people expected. And I think that with improvements in the draft, like the defensive line and potentially
Henry Melton is the name to watch, but I don't know if he gets away from the Bears.
Henry Melton, all right. As I was saying, yeah, Henry Melton. He's supposed to be really good. He's shown up at the Senior Bowl pretty well, apparently. And if we get those improvements on the line that we're talking about, I really, really do think that the Hawks could contend for the Super Bowl this next year.
Yeah, so I think that's it for the Hawks.
But talking about the Super Bowl, before we move on to the songs, we'll make our quick Super Bowl talk, Super Bowl predictions. The Ravens and the 49ers, obviously. I personally think that the Ravens are the team of destiny this year. And the 49ers might be the most well-rounded team in the NFL right now, but I think that Ray Lewis and the way Flacco's playing, I think they're gonna pull out the victory.
I say Niners because they're just ballers. Okay, that's it. See you later. So the Sonics obviously have had some, not the Sonics, but the Kings right now, and Chris Hansen and the investment group have had some big breaking news the past couple of weeks. And I know the last time we did our podcast, it was like speculating that they had a deal together, but it wasn't confirmed yet. So about a week ago from today, actually, the deal was actually confirmed, and Hansen and the Maloofs had a agreement in place to purchase the Kings and bring them back to Seattle. So I think, and also some details on that is, of course, $525 million, but that's for like the entire team, and for 65% of the team, it's about $324 million, and that's what Chris Hansen would be paying the Maloofs for. Also, he's heard a ton about the minority owners and all that, and Hansen also has to put a deposit in for the Maloofs, so Jackson will give you some more on that.
Yeah, and so talking about the minority owners and other people trying to potentially stop the deal and keep the Kings in Sacramento, is also Kevin Johnson, the mayor of Sacramento. He's trying to get local vendors in Sacramento to all chip in a certain amount of money so they can potentially match the offer. And hopefully, what they're hoping at least is to be able to, if they can match the offer, to have the deal not go through, so that way they can keep the team in Sacramento. And in the first 3 days of that, Kevin Johnson actually got 19 vendors to each propose a minimum of $1 million. So they got $19 million in 3 days, and now they're up to actually $21 million. And that really shows they are making progress, but I don't know if they're going to be able to get that $340 million number that Hansen's offering right now. And even if they do, there's already been an agreement on the deal, so I'm not sure how the legal process works, if they'd even be able to stop the deal from happening because it already has happened.
And Kevin Johnson just wants as much attention as he can get. He's just calling 3 press conferences in a row and basically announced nothing in all of those, except he's trying to find that whale of a term that a huge investor that can just give as much money as needed to keep the team. And
one big whale investor that they're hoping to get actually is the 24-hour fitness guy. He's local in Sacramento. They're hoping that he can be a big backer on the potentially deal that would keep the Kings in Sacramento.
Yeah, I've heard Burkle too, who's the owner of the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's trying to keep it, and he met with Stern for 2 hours yesterday, I believe, on that, and he could be a whale. But what do you think are some key players on Sacramento that could really kind of springboard that team or the Sonics to kind of success?
Well, as we kind of touched on last time, DeMarcus Cousins and Tyreek Evans are most definitely their two best players. DeMarcus Cousins is a really, really good player on the inside. He's a monster, and inside he averages probably 22 and 10 around that, maybe 22 and 9.
It's just those attitude issues.
Yeah, he's not the best attitude guy. He's definitely had a lot of problems throughout his entire career. That's actually why he dropped in the draft. A lot of people said when he was drafted that based on purely talent, he could be the number 1 overall pick, but he ended up sliding later in the lottery because of his attitude issues. He's already been suspended earlier this year, so clearly there are some issues there, but if he could get that attitude turned around, he could really be a cornerstone player and an all-star, perennial all-star for years to come if he could get that turned around a little bit.
I was watching the game earlier this week, and DeMarcus was, he's strong. He's an emotional player. Of course, Tyreek Evans is a baller, and Isaiah Thomas always got to attract the hometown fans and all of that. But I think the Maloofs have basically spent no money in personnel in this team, and Hansen will obviously be way more willing to spend his money and kind of get those big-name free agents here and kind of just springboard the team to the top from nothing to something. So I think that'll be super interesting to watch for.
Yeah, and the team, they run offense pretty well when they can get their offense going, but one of the big problems they've had on offense is the amount of turnovers they have. They're in like the bottom 5 in the league in turnovers. They just average just way too many a game to be successful, and that really also hurts them on the defensive side because it gives their opponents a lot of transition chances, which really hurts their defensive stats, which is another big weakness of the team. So if they can cut down on the turnovers, I think that would be a good way to get them better offensively and defensively, and that could potentially help them going forward to rise up in the standings, as they're not really having the best of seasons. Having the last few seasons, they haven't really been all that great, so we'll see how that goes for the future.
I saw a lot of fans bickering over Darren Rovell's picture about the empty arena. How there's no fans, but I think once you know that your team's probably not going to be there for much longer, I probably wouldn't show up to many games either. But I know Sacramento fans are fighting for their team behind Kevin Johnson. Is just a pain in the side for trying to keep his team, but gotta give him credit even though it's annoying.
Yeah, and so we obviously feel for those Kings fans over here, but as we went through a similar thing obviously with the Thunder a little while back, but it's looking more and more likely that the Kings are going to be coming over here and that we're going to be getting the Sonics back potentially for next season. So, one more update on next season is that for at least next season, potentially even the season after that, we're going to have to be playing in Key Arena because the new arena won't be finished by that time.
Oh, and we have to talk about some about the Lakers because just everyone talks about them, and they just suck right now. I mean, Dwight Howard can't make a free throw, but that's it for that. So I think we'll be moving on to the Huskies next.
All right, so what we're going to be moving on to next is the Huskies, and I think we're going to start with basketball. After starting 4-0 in conference play, they've lost their last 3 and just have not looked good. They have just not looked good at all doing it. After such a good start, so much positive enthusiasm after those first 4 games. They looked really bad recently. Just really bad.
I don't know how you lose to Utah. First of all, you can check out my article at uwnation.com on that one. I think they just have too much confidence against some of these opponents, such as Utah and Oregon State, and teams they should beat like that. But
yeah, those 2 games definitely should have been wins. This last game against Oregon only has 2 losses all year, so they've they're clearly some might say they're better than Arizona for the class of the Pac-12 right now. Those two teams are definitely the best two. You can maybe throw in UCLA in there too.
UCLA had a big upset against Arizona,
but then the next night they lost to Arizona State.
Trap game.
Talking about those two teams, Arizona and Arizona State, I believe, are coming in to Heck Ed to play UW this next week. Those would be a couple games to really show if the Huskies can improve. Because obviously, if they play like they have recently, they're gonna get destroyed.
Yeah.
But if they can show some improvement, I definitely think they can beat Arizona State. And they've shown that they play Arizona tough. They've shown that in the past few years. We'll see a lot of new faces this year, whether they can do that. But playing at home, which is good, and hopefully they can come out with some more energy and more defensive intensity, which is really where we've been lacking, I think.
Yeah, I think if they want to make the NCAA tournament with the at-large bid, they'll have to beat Arizona, UCLA, and Oregon all at home, which would be all quality wins, obviously. And also one of Arizona or UCLA on the road. That's important. But I think if Romar keeps developing them and kind of goes back to his tactics and gets the team motivated like at the beginning of the conference play, that the Huskies could contend for berth for the NCAA tourney in the Pac-12 tournament in Vegas, or they could even contend for the regular season title, which they got last year, and then got upset by Oregon State in the tournament, of course, because of the inconsistency. But
yeah, so this year the defensive intensity has been really the problem, and also offensively, when Wilcox doesn't get involved, it doesn't shoot the ball well, we really haven't had many other options. Scott Suggs has been there, but we really need more from the other guys. So, Marshall, let me ask you the question. Who do you think is going to be the most important player to take a big step forward to help the Huskies propel them into maybe a little win streak here?
Well, that's a good question because yesterday, Andrew Andrews and Sean Kemp Jr. showed some promise in their play. Andrews, he just had a great career in that building in Oregon, Oregon Matthew Knight Arena. Scored 41 in the state championship game or state game last year as he went to high school in Portland. And also he scored for 15 points last night, obviously not as much as 41, but he still played really well for the Huskies and has been obviously the bright spot of the point guard position this year with Gaddy just totally blowing it.
Yeah, I think Gaddy might actually be the worst shooting guard of all time. His shot just he probably had like 6 or 7 air balls in the past week.
I saw Montlake Madness on Twitter having a drinking game for every time Gaddy turned the ball over, which was clever.
You could add in that how many times he air balls it. I mean, the man can't shoot at all. But I think your point on Andrews is a really good one because I've said from the beginning of the season that he's really shown a lot of potential, a lot of promise. And I think Romar's just gotta let him do his thing, because sometimes Andrews is a little out of control, but there's times when we really just lack for offense, and I think if Romar just lets Andrews in those times specifically just do his thing, that would be definitely provide a real spark for the offense, because when we don't have C.J. Wilcox going, we really seem to be struggling for points.
Yeah, I think that comes with maturity too. Obviously, he's a redshirt freshman, and Romar has yelled at him a couple of times on the bench for some of the decisions he's made, but I think over time, obviously Andrews will mature and become the elite point guard that Husky basketball is used to, and Nigel Williams-Goss will obviously help with that. And Nigel Williams-Goss had a game-winning shot this week at the Hoop Hall Classic or last weekend, and he's just cold-blooded, and I can't wait for him to come in next year and just tear it up.
So, yeah, talking about, I know it's a little early to talk about next year, but is Williams-Gossel your biggest, the guy you think is going to be able to make the biggest impact next year, or is there someone else you think is going to be able to come in and really do some work for the Huskies next year?
Yeah, I think Goss will obviously have a huge impact on the guard position. Darren Johnson put up 42 points this week as he plays for Sheldon with Dakari Allen, Darrell Williams, 2 San Diego State commits, and I think Darren Johnson will surprise some people. He's not rated that highly. I mean, he's rated pretty high, 4-star, I believe. But yeah, he'll surprise some people. Oh, and the Huskies just got a commit this week from point guard Jamel Taylor out of Pacific Hills, California. He's a huge sleeper guy and also could help at the point guard position. But clearly, as he showed last week, Dwight Howard, Aaron Gordon is just a huge part of this class, and if he decides to take his talents to at Seattle and the University of Washington, UW could be a contender for obviously next year. He's probably a one and done. Actually, he is a one and done. So, but I think he'll be huge next year and could really mesh with Andrews as well as Nigel Williams-Goss. I know Nigel's recruiting him to come to UW, so that'll be interesting to watch.
And so I think that's all we got for Husky basketball, and our next bit will be on Husky football.
Well, with about 10 days from signing day, the Huskies are sitting pretty with some recruits. Husky football, the state of the program is pretty good right now, and the future looks pretty bright.
So, Marshall, who do you think is going to be... Well, first of all, why don't you give everyone an update on the signees, who's looking to sign, or who has signed, who's looking to sign, and then talk about who do you think is going to be able to have the biggest impact next season.
Well, I think some big recruits right now and commits that have verbally committed to UW, Deshaun Hall, DeMaurier Stringfellow, let's see, Daryl Daniels, it's going to be solid, some raw wide receivers, and John Rawson, the two I mentioned before. D-line is looking pretty nice. Marcus Faria is super underrated, Elijah Qualls, all those guys, Andrew Basham, Jamie Bryant, JoJo Mathis, Azim Victor, linebacker right there. The linebacking core is going to be super deep, which is awesome. Connor O'Brien coming in there too. Trevor Walker and Troy Williams already are enrolled in UW actually, and started classes about 2-3 weeks ago, and all I've heard is that they've loved it so far. Jermaine Kelly at the cornerback position, he's super underrated I think, and could be the best corner out of California. Him and Johnny Johnson are both awesome players. Johnny Johnson, of course, committing to UCLA this week. UCLA had a huge week with Priest Willis, Tahan Goodman, Tyler Foreman, and Johnny Johnson committing all after their official visits to UCLA. I think they'll have a huge defensive back class, but they had a huge defensive back class last year, so I'm not sure how much playing time these new commits are going to get. But back to UW, I think the biggest impact could be Deshaun Hall right off the bat, and Jermaine Kelly, but Deshaun Hall is kind of looking around. He's being recruited heavily by Texas A&M. I think it's between A&M, TCU, and UW for him, but he's still currently committed to UW. He's supposed to unofficially visit next weekend as well, with a ton of other recruits. I know Ryan Turman and Miles Jack visited this past weekend, and I talked to Ryan, and he said he loved it, and so did Miles. They are going to be unofficially visiting next weekend as well. Look for Nico Fala to visit next weekend, possibly. Shows parents that I think he's just flipped back between USC and UW a ton. He's just trying to make up his mind, and that decision the final decision is coming on signing day, he told me, so that's one to look out for. Maurice Swain, defensive line from Georgia, big body, really likes UW in Indiana. Will be visiting San Diego State this coming weekend, so I don't think location's a factor for him, but for all this recruiting stuff, you can go to UW Nation. That's where it all goes down.
Where it all goes down. And one big name that we talked about last time on the Monthly Brew was Reuben Foster, and he actually has seemingly dropped off of, or he has left UW off his radar now, and is seemingly just focused on Alabama because Marshall's telling me he seems to have he has a baby girl, and so Alabama would just be the best situation for him, which is really kind of disappointing because
Yeah.
he was really looking at UW, and he is just an amazing linebacker. He's a really great player. So that's obviously a big disappointment. But as Marshall was saying, the class is looking just better and better by the day. And with signing day next week, all this stuff will become official. And we will definitely give an update on the blog for sure.
Yes, and also on Reuben Foster, I think his finals now are Alabama, Auburn, and Georgia. He went to Georgia this weekend, really liked it. Obviously, like Jackson said, the baby girl, just kind of too far to leave. But I think it's just great we got him to visit, like a 5-star, number 2 best player in the nation. Got him to visit to UW when he's from Georgia. So that goes a long way. And kind of the future recruits, and I know UW has already offered some 2014 recruits from around that SEC recruiting area, so look out for some future recruits to consider UW for down in the South. So I think that's it for Husky football right now, and make sure you keep an eye out for all the signing day updates on Twitter. I'll have some, obviously, and but UW's looking good right now. We'll have more of a clear view of what the future can look like not this coming Wednesday, but the next one. So just keep a lookout, and that's good for the Huskies. Well, with about 10 days from signing day, the Huskies are sitting pretty with some recruits. Husky football, the state of the program is pretty good right now, and the future looks pretty bright.
So, Marshall, who do you think is going to be... Well, first of all, why don't you give everyone an update on the signees, who's looking to sign, or who has signed, who's looking to sign, and then talk about who do you think is going to be able to have the biggest impact next season.
Well, I think some big recruits right now and commits that have verbally committed to UW, Deshaun Hall, DeMaurier Stringfellow, let's see, Daryl Daniels, it's going to be solid, some raw wide receivers, and John Rawson, the 2 I mentioned before. D-line is looking pretty nice. Marcus Faria is super underrated, Elijah Qualls, all those guys, Andrew Basham, Jamie Bryant, JoJo Mathis, Azim Victor, linebacker right there. The linebacking core is going to be super deep, which is awesome. Connor O'Brien coming in there too. Trevor Walker and Troy Williams already are enrolled in UW actually, and started classes about 2-3 weeks ago. And all I've heard is that they've loved it so far. Jermaine Kelly at the cornerback position, he's super underrated, I think, and could be the best corner out of California. Him and Johnny Johnson are both awesome players. Johnny Johnson, of course, committing to UCLA this week. UCLA had a huge week with Priest Willis, Tahan Goodman, Tyler Foreman, and Johnny Johnson committing all after their official visits to UCLA. I think they'll have a huge defensive back class. But they had a huge defensive back class last year, so I'm not sure how much playing time these new commits are going to get. But back to UW, I think the biggest impact could be Deshaun Hall right off the bat and Jermaine Kelly. But Deshaun Hall is kind of looking around. He's being recruited heavily by Texas A&M. I think it's between A&M, TCU, and UW for him. But he's still currently committed to UW. He's supposed to unofficially visit next weekend as well, with a ton of other recruits. I know Ryan Turman and Miles Jack visited this past weekend, and I talked to Ryan, and he said he loved it, and so did Miles. They are going to be unofficially visiting next weekend as well. Look for Nico Fala to visit next weekend, possibly. Show his parents that I think he's just flipped back between USC and UW a ton. He's just trying to make up his mind, and that decision the final decision is coming on signing day, he told me, so that's one to look out for. Maurice Swain, defensive line from Georgia. Big body, really likes UW in Indiana. Will be visiting San Diego State this coming weekend, so I don't think location's a factor for him. But for all this recruiting stuff, you can go to UW Nation. That's where it all goes down.
Where it all goes down. And one big name that we talked about last time on the Monthly Brew was Reuben Foster, and he actually has seemingly dropped off of, or he has left UW off his radar now, and is seemingly just focused on Alabama because, as Marshall's telling me, he seems to have he has a baby girl, and so Alabama would just be the best situation for him, which is really kind of disappointing because he was really looking at UW, and he is just an amazing linebacker. He's a really great player. So that's obviously a big disappointment. But as Marshall was saying, the class is looking just better and better by the day. And with signing day next week, all this stuff will become official. And we will definitely give an update on the blog for sure.
Yes, and also on Reuben Foster, I think his finals now are Alabama, Auburn, and Georgia. He went to Georgia this weekend, really liked it. Obviously, like Jackson said, the baby girl, just kind of too far to leave. But I think it's just great we got him to visit, like a 5-star, number 2 best player in the nation. Got him to visit to UW when he's from Georgia. So that goes a long way. And kind of the future recruits, and I know UW has already offered some 2014 recruits from around that SEC recruiting area, so look out for some future recruits to consider UW for down in the South. So I think that's it for Husky football right now, and make sure you keep an eye out for all the signing day updates on Twitter. I'll have some, obviously, and but UW's looking good right now. We'll have more of a clear view of what the future can look like not this coming Wednesday, but the next one. So just keep a lookout, and that's good for the Huskies. And now we will be talking about the best team in Seattle, the Seattle Mariners, babe.
Yeah, and so recently they've got a couple just minor signings. Ronnie Paulino is a catcher they signed to a minor league deal, and they brought back Michael Morse, kind of an interesting name. After a really great 2011 season, he kind of dropped off in 2012. Hopefully he can regain form and come back and produce. And another thing, it's a name that was circulating around early in the offseason was Michael Bourne, and he is looking more and more like he's going to sign with the Mets, and which would mean the Mariners miss out on another prospect, seeming like that is just deja vu all over again. They can't seem to sign anyone this offseason.
I think the deal with the Bourne, all that situation is the draft picks compensation thing just killed him, because any team who signs him has to give up a first-round draft pick, which is killer, and no team wants to do that. So that has really hurt his market, and I think the Mets aren't even showing that much interest now, and he's really he might have to just sign for a 1-year deal and hit the open market again next year and see how it is. But Scott Boras is his agent, so look for something to get done there pretty soon, I'm guessing, as Mariners, Mets rumored, and possibly the Orioles. But on the Mike Morse thing, I think I'm just super pumped for him. I went to Mariners Fan Fest yesterday, and it was great. And he was talking, and he said he's gonna be, his nickname is the Beast, and he said he's gonna be the Sea Beast in Seattle, and will destroy this year. But he's a character. He's really funny. A great guy, and I think the clubhouse will be so much different this year, because Wedge was talking a little bit about how Ichiro and Olivo and some of those veterans didn't help out the clubhouse a lot last year. Like, they didn't even speak English. And I think Raul Ibanez, experienced veteran, will help out a ton this year. And also with some other veterans like Jason Bay and like Michael Morse. He was a kid, but now he was a kid when he was here first, He left for Washington, became a man, and has come back, and he is a man now. And I think hopefully he'll have a huge impact on the team. Kendrys Morales should too. So
yeah, Morales is a big name hitter, switch hitter. He's good average and power. Hopefully he can really bring some pop, and with the fences being brought in a little bit as well, maybe that can keep his power numbers where they were, as a lot of people seem when they come to Seattle have those numbers drop down.
Yeah.
But if Morales can keep the numbers where they've been at recently, that would definitely be a very good addition. And one thing manager Eric Wedge was talking about was that supposedly there's some sort of deal in place to get a backup catcher, which, to be honest, I don't really care about. I want things to get done of people who are actually going to play. A backup catcher, that means nothing to me. I want players signed that are actually going to be able to play and produce every day, as opposed to a backup catcher playing once.
Yeah, I think
maybe once a week.
You'd have to sign it though, because Montero's a liability catching.
Yeah, that's true.
But he said he put a lot of work into that in the off season, as the phone rings. But I think Gutierrez will have a big impact as well, because he's gotten 100% healthy this offseason, has really worked on that. Oh, Jesus Montero also said he worked on his speed, which obviously needs work. And he was running a lot, and he was sarcastically talking about that. But he's a good kid, and I really like him.
Yeah, and so with all these additions, hopefully the Mariners should be better than last year. How much better, obviously, remains to be seen. I wonder how the pitching staff's going to be actually now with the loss of, obviously, we got to trade Vargas to get Morales. So after Felix, we'll see.
I still like Joe Saunders as a name they could sign, but you never know that. They got some great young pitching in the minor leagues, some great players, some good kids. So I think the future looks bright for the Mariners, and Eric Wedge was super upbeat about that. So
yeah, so I think there's definitely potential for at least more successful season than in the past, and hopefully we can get it done.
Definitely, and I'm kind of want to add a new part to the end of our show, kind of like a Twitter shout-out part, some people to follow. And the first guy I want to mention is Derek Stevens, who's he kind of scouts the Seahawks and gives some potential free agent names, draftees, signings. He's a good follow. Brian Nemhauser, a Hawk blogger, he's good too. He works with Scott Enyart. They all kind of have their podcast too and talk about the Hawks. Jackson Bevins does too. And I think those... Oh, and of course UW Nation. You gotta follow UW Nation. That's where you get all your UW news day in and day out on the Rivals Network. Hit it up.
Yeah, so if you guys... For those of you who don't know, Marshall is newly working for UW Nation. That's why he keeps adding in all those plugs there, which is good. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff on UW Nation, and if you guys want some more guys to hit up on Twitter and follow, Chris Daniels is a good guy to constantly giving updates on the Sonics Kings deal. He's really good. And David Sue, that's David HSU, does a really good job of talking about free agents and draft needs for the Hawks. So I think that's all we got for our show today. Make sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Seattle Sports Soup. Thanks, guys.